Good evening, everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of Studio 118. I'm Reuben. This is Bunjee.
Hey.
How's it going? Thank you for joining us. If you're watching us, you're probably streaming live on YouTube, or you're watching us on Austin Cable Access Channel 11. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple of announcements to get out of the way before we get into our discussion about two taboo subjects. We'll get into them. I'm excited. But before that, I just want to let you guys know we're streaming here from Calvary South Austin in Austin, Texas. And we're just a local church here, but we want to let you know we've opened the doors to our church. We're meeting face-to-face. We meet on Sunday mornings at 9:15 and 11:15 a.m. And we're inviting you to join us. Come here and fellowship with us, sing songs of praise, and get some good Bible study in. And we also meet on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m., and we've taken all the necessary safety measures, so that way people are feeling safe. Just come on by. If you have any other questions about that, feel free to contact our church. Our number is 512-576-5433, or you can email your questions at info@calvarysouthaustin.com. But yeah, we've opened up the doors of our church. We invite you to come join us here at Calvary South Austin. Also, just to remind you, after our discussion tonight, like we always do, we have a Q&A portion. We encourage you to send in your questions, preferably, of course, related to the topic. But if you have any questions, jump on the live stream on YouTube. There's a live chat going on, and we'll queue up your question. Or if you'd like, you can, if you're watching on Austin Cable Access Channel 11, you can call your question in, and that number again is 512-576-5433. And one last thing, just wanted to let you know some good news related to our church. We are actually in the process of opening up a brand new school. It's called Calvary Christian Academy, or Calvary Classical Academy, sorry. And if you want any more information on the church, or on the school rather, and when it's opening and all that kind of good stuff, feel free to go to the website. It's calvaryclassicalacademy.com. Again, that's calvaryclassicalacademy.com. Coming soon this fall. Get some info on it, or contact our church. All right. Well, with that out of the way, we are going to get started on this amazing topic. So they're basically a combination of all the things that, all the banned subjects that you're not allowed to talk about during holidays, basically. So we're talking about politics and religion.
So you not only want to offend people with a conversation about religion, but you also want to offend people with a conversation about politics. You want to blend them both together. Are you hoping that the negativity of both will cancel each other out and it becomes a positive conversation?
I figured this is the perfect moment. We've survived 2020.
We did.
We've survived the election. And what better way to blow up the internet?
We made it through the rain. And we kept our point of view.
Yes, I want to offend as many people as I can tonight.
That's the goal.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about religion and politics.
Why? What do you want to talk about? I don't care.
How dare you?
You're wrong.
How dare you?
I know everything you stand for, and I disagree with it. This conversation's over.
This conversation is making me experience a microclimate of global warming right now. I'm hot under the collar.
Some would call it a microaggression. Yeah, so obviously these are two controversial topics. I'm sure you people out there in internet land, I'm sure you've heard the old saying, do not talk about politics or religion around the dinner table or during holidays with family. Just don't bring it up if you want to have a good holiday. Well, it's not a holiday. And we're not around our family, so we figured now's the time to do it, right?
They quit inviting me.
Yes. For other reasons, I'm sure. Those were smaller factors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is something I grew up with. This is something I still hear thrown about, even within my own, family circle. And, typically it's kind of worked out that way. But, there's opportunities here and there. And, I mean, they're subjects that I like talking about personally.
Sure.
And I like staying up to date. But anyways, why are these topics so controversial? I think that's where we want to kick it off. How did politics and religion become so controversial as conversation topics?
Yeah. Well, just to take a stab in the dark here, My guess is that people don't know why they believe what they believe about these things, but they believe them. And, when you can't defend a belief that you've embraced, it's easy to get defensive about that. Like if you hold on to a position, you don't really have a good reason for holding on to it. It just resonates with you.
Yeah.
And then someone comes along and challenges you about that point of view. It's really easy to just immediately get on the defensive. And then because you're not willing to consider another point of view, you're not willing to do the hard work of investigating why you believe what you believe, it's just easier to just dismiss the conversation at the outset and just say that we shouldn't talk about this, right?
Or start lobbing ad hominems.
Sure. I always like how ad hominem immediately goes to ad baculum in my world, because fisticuffs is always the best way to solve issues.
Yes.
But I just think that people get real defensive real quick because they really don't know why they've embraced the point of view that they've embraced. Yeah. And one reason why I say that is just because I've gotten into so many of these conversations with people where, at the end of the day, it's more common to find someone who holds on to a belief and has nothing to back it up. And I tend to find that those people are the most defensive. Whereas people who have actually done some research, people who have actually studied their point of view, know why they believe what they believe, they're more open to talking and considering other points of views. And those are really fun conversations, regardless of whether we're talking religion or politics. Yeah. But I think that there's a whole lot of people that believe a whole lot of things on both fronts, both religion and politics, but they don't really know why they believe those things. And so the minute their belief is challenged, they clam up or they get defensive, and conversations get shut down real quick.
This is where I think, we can use social media to our benefit is, typically these are person-to-person I'm kidding. Social media has worsened things, right?
I get all my information from Wikipedia. Is that good? Is that okay?
Hey, it helped me get through high school and college. It's got to be worth something.
It's got to be. Yeah. I'm sure we've all lost friends with, conversations, regardless of whether we're talking religion or politics. Yeah. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who is pro-choice, and I'm pro-life. Of course, I haven't always been pro-life. I came to the pro-life position after I became a Christian, and someone brought me to some scriptures to help me to see what the biblical perspective on this topic was. And, before that, my position was pro-choice because, that's what all my friends said. And that's, it's not like I ever really took the time to go investigate, what does science say about the beginning of life and when life, begins? And, what does the science say about, whether abortion is going to impact the health of the woman negatively or not? Or I didn't do any of that research. I was both on a political level and on a religious level. I was what I would consider an ignorant agnostic, which is a double down, yes. A double down on that. But to me, ignorance was bliss, and the less I could know about stuff, the better. Because of the circle that I ran in, I embraced the choice position, and then after becoming a Christian and investigating the resurrection of Jesus Christ and placing my faith in the Lord, then in the middle of a conversation one evening at a Bible study, I presented my point of view, which was pro-choice, and I was immediately and lovingly confronted by others in the study who immediately began to take me to scriptures to help me to see what the Bible says about the sanctity of life, and I began to investigate that and came around to a pro-life position. So I'm talking with a friend of mine who's also a believer, but he's still pro-choice. And this is a friend that I've hung out with for years, and I brought him to a scenario where we were in a park and we're looking across the the grassy field, and we see a father basically choking the life out of his young son. And I asked my friend, I said, would you step in and stop that? Would you step in and, do anything that you could to stop this father from choking his son to death? And he said, yeah. And I said, of course, I know you. And you would, of course, step in and take care of that situation. And then I brought it around to, well, why don't you do that politically? Here's people who want to use political means to allow parents to kill their unborn child. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you want to apply the same measure that you would apply here in the park? Why wouldn't you want to apply that in the same way with this political situation where we have a political leader who wants to continue to advance the pro-choice position and allow parents to basically end the life of their unborn child? And that's kind of like the last time we hung out.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
He didn't have an answer for it, so he got frustrated. Mm-hmm. He had never really thought that scenario through of, if I would be willing to do this, then why wouldn't I be willing to do that? And at the end of the day, it's because he had aligned himself politically with people who say this is okay. Yeah. And he didn't really have a good response for why it is that he aligned himself in that way, just that he had. And because it put him on the defensive, our relationship just kind of fizzled out and fell apart. And I'm sure that, many of us have experienced this, whether it be online or in person, where the minute you engage in a conversation about religion or politics and you know more than they know, and they don't have a reason or a ready defense for why they vote the way they vote or why they believe the way they believe, they're, oftentimes going to back away from that relationship. And so then we kind of begin to, soften our approach to the point where many Christians then just stop talking about religion and politics for fear of losing friends. Yeah. And I don't think that's a real good approach there.
Yeah, that's a shame, man. So, I've definitely experienced the same where, any attempt to bring up such a topic, whether it be religion or politics, is met with just kind of stiff arm. Let's not bring that up. Let's just stick to surface level topics. Let's just kind of not rock the boat. And that's a shame, that's a bummer, because when I think of topics that, if you want to just get super cheesy about it, we have one life to live. Mm-hmm. And do you want to really spend a lot of your time sticking to surface level topics and just kind of skirting around issues a lot of the time? Yeah. I think it would be more appropriate and more beneficial you can even deepen relationships, deepen bonds by passionately debating politics and religion. Because these, in my opinion, these are topics that have to deal with very significant issues on a moral component, on an authoritative component. That's what I was going to mention also, is couple that issue about we don't know how to defend our positions a lot of the time, but the fact that these positions have to deal with authority in our life and the moral component to that just kind of raises the stakes. Mm-hmm. If I'm wrong about this, then just will flip my worldview, and now I don't know if I can handle that. Yes. And so a lot of us are hesitant to kind of tread the waters, and we tread them lightly, and that's a bummer though. And that's where I'm definitely a proponent of, we should have more of these conversations, but like you said, we should get back to the basics of learning how to converse in general, learn how to take criticism, learn how to defend your own view. This was taught in schools generations ago, right? And now we're more taught about, lesser things, definitely not critical thinking.
Well, we have a education system now that is more interested in you passing standardized tests, regurgitating information, memorizing and repeating, rather than teaching kids how to think for themselves, rather than helping them to understand what common sense is and how to use the laws of logic and apply it to argumentation and thought processes.
CalvaryClassicalAcademy.com.
Calvary Classical Academy, fall 21. So that is one of the awesome things that we see coming up with our school that we're starting, is that we want to teach kids how to think. and how to use logic and how to think for themselves, so that as they process information, it's not you're back on your heels defending, something that you believe and you don't know why, but it's let me take in this information, think it through, process, consider it from, different angles, and come away with a better understanding of things, regardless of whether it changes your mind or not. At least you have a broader perspective of a topic, which, if you can learn something every day, you're all the better for it, even if it doesn't change your mind, right? So, but we live in a society now that doesn't want to put in the hard work, doesn't want to take the time to study. It doesn't want to, really understand why they believe what they believe. They just want, the CNN narrative to be crammed down their throat, and I'll walk away and just, become the NPC that just regurgitates, whatever I'm told to say, so that I can just get back to listening to my favorite music or cheering on my favorite sports team or doing the mindless things that, that we all love to do. But, it's easier to not rock the boat, or what Walter Martin said was the non-rockabotus mentality.
Nice. Yep. Yeah, and that's something I'm a youth leader as well, so that's something I really try to get across to today's youth, at least the ones that are coming here to our church, is getting them to think critically about how does religion intersect with culture? How does religion intersect with politics and the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age? Right. How do we as Christians, as pilgrims, as sojourners, how do we navigate this culture in this world and then come out stronger for it, right? And part of that is being willing to be criticized or critiqued, have your worldview critiqued, and then you go and do the study, go and study the Word, God's Word, the Bible, and go and study the basis for the foundations for all those things, and then go back and get that critique and see if it stands up,
right? And
just follow that process over and over. But again, I think what people are really holding on when they think of religion today is just really either a set of rules or just kind of a crutch that's there when I'm getting myself in trouble. It's not really a way of life or a foundation for living and breathing and thinking and everything. It really is just kind of a side component, right? And that's a bummer. So, yeah, these topics are no doubt controversial, but we're here talking about them because we believe it's important for everyone to have these conversations. That's part of what Studio 118 is about. I forgot to mention at the outset, but it's based on Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18. Come, let us reason, says the Lord. And our God is a God who desires for his people to be critical thinkers. Our God did not create us just to be mindless automatons, just kind of blindly following commandments, but he gave us free will, he gave us a mind, and part of living in today's culture is we have governance, we have policies that are being put in place that affect our everyday lives, and we as children of God, being made in the image of God, we have a responsibility to engage with these topics, engage with the culture, and if there's something that goes against reality, if there's something that goes against God's commandments and God's word, we have to fight that head on. We have to fight it with clear thinking and rationality. And it takes effort. Yes, as Bunjee was talking about, it takes effort. And are we willing to put in that effort? So let's not shy away from these topics. I think we're going to have a really good conversation the rest of the evening. But, specifically talking about for Christians, right? Maybe we can start, move on to this in terms of how should Christians then be able to have conversations? Is there kind of a scriptural component that lets us have these conversations? And obviously, I'm kind of a leading question here, but I'm thinking specifically like 1 Peter 3:15. But are there other types of scriptural components that will allow Christians to be part of that political sphere, that sphere that lets us put our ideas out there and see who wins the day?
Yeah, I guess. To expand your question a little bit here, and before we launch into a few verses here to consider, we have to broaden the question out a little bit further because, there are at least two spheres where those conversations could be taking place, right? Mm-hmm. One is, should Christians be engaging in these conversations with one another? Is the church a place for Christians to gather together and discuss politics? And then there's the conversations with people outside of the church. Should Christians be engaging in political conversations with people outside of the church, right? And if so, is there a biblical reason? Is there a biblical mandate? Is there some sort of biblical precedent for us engaging in these sorts of conversations? Would the Lord be pleased with political conversations inside of the church? Would the Lord be pleased with political conversations outside of the church as we engage the world around us? And the reason why I pose these questions first is because, I find that most people are on one of two extremes. Yeah. When I find people getting defensive, we engage in a political conversation. We spark up a conversation about some political issue or situation. And oftentimes I'll find myself face to face with one of two people, and one is, the person who is just kind of like, Christians shouldn't talk about politics. It's just like this, staunch, hardline, this is not something that Christians ought to be dealing with. We should only evangelize, or we should only, but politics is out of it.
It's a secular thing that we shouldn't even cross.
Yeah. I had one person tell me that, I don't want to talk politics with you because the Bible says we shouldn't talk about foolish things. So it's just so he's basically categorized all politics as foolishness, and therefore, because the Bible says avoid foolish arguments.
That's pretty airtight, man. I mean, I don't know. Can you get out of that one?
No logical leaps in there at all. Well, my response was, well, abortion is a political issue. And I don't find any of my debates about abortion to be foolish arguments. I think that they're very sound arguments that are intended to save the life of an unborn child, right? I don't find anything foolish about this. Yeah. Right. So that's how I, helped him to, at least understand why I'm, pro political conversation. Because there's so much at stake, whether we're talking about, healthcare, whether we're talking about human rights or civil rights, whether we're talking about, when does life begin and how does that impact, policies regarding abortion, Mexico City stuff, and the list could just go on, right? I don't find any of these to be foolish topics. Right. The Bible has a lot to say about civil rights. The Bible has a lot to say about race, about systemic racism and how it impacts the government. The Bible has a lot to say about, sanctity of life. Where else would we understand that we aren't to murder or to steal or to, these are all biblical principles that are then employed in the political arena, right? I don't find any of these to be foolish topics, and to argue that, well, if you're going to argue about all this political stuff, you're having foolish arguments. Well, you just basically called a lot of the Bible foolishness. So I don't think that's what Paul was talking about. And those who would say that Christians shouldn't engage in political debates, I don't think they fully grasped the fullness of what the Bible says, right? And then on the other extreme are those who think that the only way to save our society is through political means. Yeah. And so that's all they talk about is politics.
Yeah, definitely saw a lot of that this election cycle. Yep.
Especially the people who were seeing Trump as their savior.
Yeah, the way I've heard it put it, basically in a lot of terms, but it came down to if Trump doesn't win, then say goodbye to
all is lost.
Yeah, all is lost.
All is lost.
We've kind of lost control. There's no coming back from this, but it was all on Trump needs to be reelected. Right. That kind of conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as I pointed out in a recent video, all the self-appointed prophets, in the New Apostolic Reformation churches, who were just insisting and claiming Trump's,
quote unquote,
and they still have people showing up their church today. It's just like, why would you go back to that church? They're clearly a false prophet. They prophesied a second term. It ain't happening. But back to the point is that you have these people that are so far invested in politics that that's all they talk about, and they've lost sight of the fact that, politics is actually downstream from culture. And if you want to impact the politics of our nation, then you first have to impact the culture. And we impact the culture by leading people to Jesus. I didn't become pro-choice because somebody presented me with an argument about politics. I became pro-choice. Pro-life. What did I say? I was pro-choice.
Yeah.
I didn't become pro-life because somebody, won a political argument against me. I became pro-life because I became a Christian. And after becoming a Christian, seeing what the Scripture says about this, I gave up the pro-choice position for the pro-life position, right? And so that's what the people who are on the extreme over here, if that's all they ever talk about is politics, and they're hoping for a political solution to all the problems in America. It's like, I think one of the biggest problems in America is politics. So
these are the types of people also that would say things like, we mentioned this before, how on the abortion issue, if we could just get the right legislations to pass, if we could just outlaw abortion or think of like healthcare, if we could just get rid of the mandate or whatever, and then things would just magically be fine. Abortions would decrease and that kind of stuff, and we wouldn't have any of societal issues. That really doesn't follow, right?
No.
I mean, the way I think about it is that old adage that says, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. All you're really doing is just angering a whole bunch of people.
Right.
And that's where I think what you're going to get to is that for Christians, we need to, like politics is downstream from culture, we need to change culture.
Right.
So that culture can then impact politics over again.
And then it's cyclical as well, so you've got culture that impacts politics and politics that impacts culture, right? So you end up in kind of a twisted downward spiral, and the only way to bring our country out of that is for Christians to remember that we've been called to accomplish the Great Commission, which is to lead people to Jesus and disciple them in Christ so that they can go and accomplish the same commission, right? If you think that you can get the right president in there to sign all the right executive orders, to pass all the right laws to fix our country, how long have we been seeing this political process just stalled out?
Yes.
Because of the infighting and
Yeah.
because people can't agree and because people aren't willing to work together. And I guarantee that stimulus check is on the way as soon as they can get it together.
Yeah.
But here we are, months and months later, no stimulus check.
Yeah.
And that alone, the thought that the stimulus check is the solution, when what is really the solution is just open everything back up and let people go back to work, right? And don't kill jobs with executive orders.
Yeah.
But okay.
Is the live stream still going? Were we cut off?
We've been shut off, but all right. So let's
back to the topic. Yeah.
Yes.
So is there a way that we can meet in the middle for these two extremes? The ones that heavily depend on politics, they've basically elevated politics above their theology, so to speak, and those who are just completely opposed to politics. Is there a way we can meet in the middle? Is there some sort of ground we can share?
Yeah, I think making sure that we first have a biblical worldview is, in my mind, most important. If we would just begin with a biblical worldview and then move from the Bible to, so moving from theology to praxology, so to speak, right? Moving from what does the Bible say? How does that apply to me? And then what does that mean in the way that I should live my life now? And I think that if we did that, if we would go and gain a biblical perspective of what God would lead us to do and then apply that to our lives, I think those who are opposed to having political conversations would realize that that's not biblical. And those who believe that politics must be the solution for all of America's problems, they would realize that, well, that's not the solution either. And I think that both groups on these fringe extremes would come back to what the Bible says, apply it to their lives, and boom, now you've got Christians that are more centered because they've centered their lives on the Scriptures.
Yeah, like what you're saying, when we look at Scripture, the clear mandate, at least, the biggest mandate that we have is the Great Commission, right? Go and make disciples.
Yeah.
And then always be ready to give a reason, right? But for the purpose of being seen as blameless in society. So we shouldn't be going out and stirring up controversy just for controversy's sake,
right,
just to win arguments. You know, the Bible calls us to have these conversations with meekness and fear. I think that's probably the biggest rub that a lot of us have, is that we get so tied up, we get so invested in these topics, like especially this past election season, right? Whatever side you were on, everybody, I'm sure, was just chomping at the bit whenever something happened that favored their party or their candidate. We were, getting on Twitter or getting on Facebook and sharing that. Aha, see this? And more evidence just came out. Or this evidence was just debunked.
Right.
Take that. And they're whatever names they want to call the other party. And that's what we get tied up in. But biblically speaking, we're going against the Bible. We're supposed to be having these conversations with meekness and fear for the purpose of, so that society, those unbelievers, non-Christians, would then see us as being blameless.
Yeah.
What they should see is our convictions and our behavior reflecting our Savior. We should be reflecting the love.
Yes.
And that should go through not only our actions, but our words.
Yep. That's a biblical mandate.
Yep.
And some might say this is a biblical mandate.
Yes. You got it all. Cable access, I've always heard the stories of cable access having, this is worse than news anchor banter. This is getting awkward now. Let me continue here. So
we're not getting spaghetti? Someone promised me spaghetti.
No, no. We're not going to do any of that. So, all right. So we get into now. We kind of gotten into this area of, do politics and Christianity mix, right? We've kind of touched on, okay, well, there's two extremes, especially in Christianity, and we want to address those people. Okay, look, don't elevate politics above theology, but don't be so completely opposed, because this is the world that we've been placed in. This is the culture we've been placed in. We have a mandate to be good stewards of our lives and our time during the time which God has placed us in.
So true.
So now, do politics and Christianity mix? We've talked about those that believe that politics should be avoided, and those that elevate politics above theology. So is talking about perhaps a way that we can, how should Christians then view politics? I guess before that, I do want to obviously answer that bigger question of, do politics and Christianity mix?
Yeah.
And just to mention a couple of verses that I think Christians who know the Bible would point to right away. Romans chapter 13, and also 1 Peter 2. So if you would, let me just read Romans 13, the relevant passage, verses 1 through 7. And this is kind of our basis for how Christians interact with governments in any generation. Paul wrote in Romans 13, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same, for he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." And on a related note, 1 Peter chapter 2, "Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme, or to governors, or to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king."
Yep.
So in there, what I see is a handful of facts about the world that we live in.
Right.
We live in a world that is obviously going to have governments over citizenry, right? They've been placed there. Number two, that those governments, those rulers, those leaders, whatever you want to call them, they have been placed there by God. They are In fact, Paul calls them God's ministers.
Right.
And then number 3, also the fact that they've been given responsibilities to basically execute justice, to promote the health, the well-being of the public, but then also when wrongdoing is done, to then give justice, to give a punishment, retribution for that evil that has been perpetrated. So those 3 facts, that's the world that we live in.
Right.
So then Christians, how should we view this? How should we engage with this culture?
Well, I would also bring up another verse here just to consider that Paul tells Timothy that all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. So if there are good works for us to engage in here in the 21st century church, and those good works include the politics of our nation, then the scriptures that we've been given should be sufficient to help us to understand how we should go about interacting with our government in whatever form it is. So I believe that these scriptures apply to us in America in the same way that they apply to a Christian living in China. Mm-hmm. Two completely different forms of government. And yet the scriptures were written for the church. The New Testament epistles specifically were written for the church age, so that Christians can have a Bible-centered point of view of how we are to interact with the world around us. And so while, the Chinese government and the American government, 2 different forms of government, the Venezuelan government and, the Canadian government, 2 different forms of government, and yet Christians in all these places are to look at these scriptures and try to understand how we ought to be applying these verses to our lives so that we can engage in the political system in which we live, and therefore to make an impact. Because really at the end of the day, what Paul is saying to the Christians in Rome and what Peter is saying to the believing Jews of the dispersion, that what we're being told to do here is not stumble people who see us in the way that we would, be law-breaking citizens, mm-hmm. Yep. Right? So in other words, I think that at the end of the day, what we're being told to do here is be good citizens so that you don't have a bad testimony. Mm-hmm. That's really what it boils down to. Even when they approached Jesus and Peter, they actually approached Peter and asked about, why they hadn't paid the temple tax. Mm. And of course, Jesus had an argument of why would he have to pay a temple tax? He's the Son of God, right? It's his temple. Yeah. He doesn't need to pay a temple tax on his temple, yeah. But he didn't make that argument because he understood that this would be perceived in the wrong light. Mm-hmm. And so what did he do? He sent Peter fishing. Mm-hmm. And then Peter caught a fish, and in the fish, was the enough money for the temple tax, right? Which, if that were...
I got to use that trick.
If that happened more often, I'd probably take up fishing.
I got to go fishing.
At this point, I'm just not even interested in fishing. But if there was cash in every fish, then...
If I could mountain bike and fish, man...
What kind of fish is that? That's a cash fish. There's gold coins.
Nice.
But so yeah, I think that what we have here are instructions for every Christian throughout the entire church age to understand how we are to interact in our society, regardless of what form of government you're living under. Mm-hmm. Which of course we're going to be talking about. Is there ever a time to disobey government? And of course, that's a valid conversation as well. But by and large, what we're supposed to be doing is living as outstanding citizens mm-hmm. in any form of government. If I move to China and take up missionary work there, then I'm to apply these verses to my life there under that government system, right?
Yeah.
So, I think at that point in time, as we consider what Paul and Peter are saying here, clearly they didn't have a problem talking about politics. Mm-hmm. And they're living at a time when, they're under dictators. who are, torturing Christians, dipping them in tar, setting them on fire, casting them into the lion's den, these sorts of things, right? And yet, Paul here is telling them to submit and to pay their taxes and to be good citizens.
He's not telling them insurrection, overthrow.
Peacefully protest is what he said.
It can be interpreted a whole mess of ways.
I don't know what you heard, but what I said was peacefully protest.
He also didn't tell him to go exclude yourself, go into the desert and become a monk.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Go live that ascetic life,
There are some who believe that we evolved from monks, but...
we do share a lot of DNA.
That's what I heard in school or something like that. I don't know.
Nice. I can trace my lineage back to monks. I got too much hair for that. I don't know. You kind of fit the bill. So, also, what we do see here is, Paul, what you're getting at also is Paul is telling us that by submitting to the government, by basically being good citizens, that in doing these things out of our, not only our love for our neighbor, but our love for our Creator, and because there is a higher calling, that by doing these things, in the public sphere, non-believers will come to glorify God. And so that is a way of fulfilling the Great Commission.
Right.
And so he's also letting us know there is the distinction between this civic duty that you have while you're here on this earth, but there's a distinction between that and then your walk with Christ as a Christian. You can do both, but remember, keep the main thing. Your higher calling leads you then to be a good citizen, because in doing so, you will win souls.
Right.
God will use that example to win souls for his kingdom.
Right.
And so for those Christians, like we said, that are on those two extremes, right? The one who is elevating politics, perhaps you're getting too passionate, and perhaps you need to dial it back and remember the main thing, which is sharing the gospel truths, leading people into a saving knowledge of our Savior Jesus Christ, so that then their lives will be transformed, and then you might start seeing those political outcomes that you so desire. Yeah. And then for those who are completely opposed, God is calling you to come out of your shell a bit. He's calling you to engage in the public arena. You have to be a good neighbor. In order to do that,
right,
you got to have conversations. You got to go and basically get dirty a little bit, right?
Yeah, for those who are so politically motivated that's all they ever really talk about, what I find in those people oftentimes is that, they're so passionate about politics that they never get to the gospel. And even if they did, they've already offended their audience so much that they're not going to be able to receive anything else that's being said, because you've been so rude and so antagonistic over, political issues, so we have to be careful when we do engage people in political debate that, we're not closing their ears to the more important gospel message, right? Because if we lead them to Christ and they are discipled in Christ, then their politics should then start lining up with what the Bible says. That's the hope and goal. And so much like myself, after becoming a Christian, I switched from the pro-choice position to the pro-life position. Why? Because I became a Christian, not because somebody argued me from one political position to another, right? And so that's what we mean when we say that politics is downstream from culture, and to change the culture, we have to lead people to Jesus, right? So if I've got a dear friend who loves to argue about the masks, and I don't mind having the mask conversation either. I don't have any intention of living the rest of my life wearing a mask on my face, right? Unless I'm mountain biking and there's mold in the air, but that's a whole nother situation. But a friend that I have who is very invested in arguing about masks rarely ever gets around to the gospel message. So he might win mask debates all day long, but what does it matter if all those people that you whooped in a mask debate die and go to hell, because you argued about masks rather than talking about Jesus Christ, right? And for those, who think that the mask is, tied to the mark of the beast and these sorts of things, it's just kind of like, well, even more reason to preach Jesus.
Yeah.
and focus on the gospel, and allow those political conversations to be tame enough so that you can bring them to the gospel message of Jesus Christ. Listen, I look at every conversation as an opportunity to present someone with the message of the gospel. As I engage in a conversation, I'll go out mountain biking, and I'll come across other bikers while I'm out there, and I'll look. Well, we're talking bikes, we're talking trails, we're talking, where we ride and these sorts of things, and in that, I'm constantly looking for that inroad to present the gospel message, and that's how we should treat politics. Those who say, well, we can't talk about politics because it's foolishness. Well, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to use politics to launch into a gospel presentation. And those who only talk about politics are missing it, because they're not bringing those political conversations that they are having back to Jesus Christ. And that's what we really ought to be doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, that's one thing, we don't want our audience to mistake what we're saying here. We're definitely not advocating that we should stop having those conversations. Obviously, we're having this conversation right now.
Politically speaking,
yes. Political, obviously. But what we are trying to do is essentially reorient our way of thinking to get our priorities in check. Yes. Always keep them in check. We should always, the Bible does call us to examine ourselves in the faith, right? We constantly have to be doing that double check of, okay, am I doing this right? Am I going down the right path? Am I thinking about this the right way? Am I prioritizing these things correctly? And so for those, obviously, that are elevating politics above religion or theology, think about that. How can I reprioritize so that I'm not offending non-believers, and hopefully I can restore those relationships and begin to have those conversations again? And obviously, you want to make genuine relationships. You don't want to just, I have a quota to meet, and I have to preach the gospel. I need to get it in there.
Right.
No, just make friends.
Right. Yeah.
Make relationships.
Be nice.
Yes, and then within that, the Lord will, give you opportunities to do so. But like as the scriptures tell us, right, in 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you.
Yes.
And do it with meekness and fear.
Yeah, gentleness and respect.
Yes. And in that, in between those, the ellipsis says, sanctify the Lord Jesus in your heart.
Right.
We must always have him as our focal point, and his example that he left us in serving others and loving others in truth and spirit, and use that example then to guide you in having these conversations. That's all we're saying.
Yep. Simple.
Simple, in a nutshell, right? Simple. I don't know why people get in fights. I don't get it.
Yeah.
So, I did want to bring up, speaking about the Bible, right? There are other examples in the Bible. So it's not like we just look at these two passages and we get all our theology, our political dealings within those two passages, right? But again, reading the Bible is a collection of books. It's written by different authors, different points of views, and different times of history. But what we do see is kind of a common thread throughout these Bible characters and their accounts. And politically speaking, again, we do see that God has used certain Bible characters in order to speak in the political realm.
Yes.
For his purpose.
Yep.
And so again, we do see that God is not opposed of Christians getting involved in political arena, whether that be just by merely voting your convictions, your biblical convictions, or by getting involved in a campaign or by running for office. God has used all sorts of ways in order to affect politics throughout history.
Which includes revolution. So we certainly see throughout the ages, where God called someone to stand up to government. We see this with Moses. The Lord sent Moses to stand up against Pharaoh. We see this, with John the Baptist. We know that John the Baptist was sent to rebuke King Herod, right? So we certainly see several times, throughout the scriptures where God raises up a leader to go and oppose human government, right? But the baseline, so you've got a baseline of this is how it should go until I call someone to engage in revolution. And we certainly saw that, with foundations of America. That was rooted in Revolution too, and I believe that God's hand was on that as well as He was establishing our nation here. So I think as a baseline, you have those scriptures that encourage submission to human government, but then when God calls someone to stand and oppose human government, then if it's a leading of the Lord, then that's His plan and His purpose. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Daniel tells us that God raises up the kings and he brings them down, and He raises up the rulers and he brings them down in His timing. And so here in America, we can just believe that God is the one who raised up Obama. God is the one who raised up Trump. God is the one who's raised up Biden. And whether you like or love or hate any of those individuals, if you have a biblical worldview, then you recognize that these are all, people that God is using for His purposes, regardless of whether we fully understand any of that or not. But what we can believe is that God is in control. He's seated upon the throne of heaven and earth. And He changes times and seasons, and He raises up kings and brings down rulers according to His sovereign will. So we can rest in that. I rejoice in knowing that because I can look at, whether I like what's going on politically or not, I can just fall back on God knows what He's doing. I don't have to figure it out.
And let me just continue about my Father's business.
Preaching the gospel message and using politics as a way of hopefully legislating Christian morality, if we can do that. Mm-hmm. But if nothing else, using the conversations as a way to bring people around to recognizing that we need Jesus Christ, but because we're all fallen sinners who are in desperate need of forgiveness.
Yeah, awesome. Way to put it. So with that, I want to take a quick break and just let you guys know you're watching Studio 118. We're talking politics, religion, and you're streaming live probably from YouTube or watching us on Austin Cable Access Channel 11. Thank you for joining us. I do want to remind you, if you're on YouTube, we have a live chat going. We have a Q&A portion after our discussion here, and we'd love to hear your thoughts, questions that you would like to hear a response that you've always wondered about, or maybe there's an objection to something that we're saying, and maybe you want to correct us here live on the interwebs. Please do so. Get on the live chat there on YouTube, youtube.com/Calvary South Austin. Also, if you're watching on Cable Access Channel 11, you can call in your question at 512-576-5433. Again, that's 512-576-5433. And lastly, we're here streaming at Calvary South Austin in Austin, Texas. We invite you to join us on Sunday mornings at 9:15, 11:15 a.m. Here in person. You can get more information at calvarysouthaustin.com, or you can call the church. Again, that number is 512-576-5433. And we also meet on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. So come out and join us. All right, so yeah, that was a really good section. Just hopefully that encourages some people out there and just really gives some good perspective and good biblical grounding for how Christians should engage in politics, even in this modern day era. But now we get to another very important question that, has definitely become kind of a trope, or is just a popular question, kind of a phrase that gets tossed around that I know I've grown up with, is the claim that America is a Christian nation. And, in the context that I've heard it in two contexts. One pro, one con. The pro side is typically said, in favor of Christianity, or in favor of, you do know that America is a Christian nation, mm-hmm. right? Kind of as a catch-all term, like I should change my mind on certain topics or something. You do know that America is a Christian nation. Okay? Now, the con of that is that, no, America is not a Christian nation, therefore, keep your religion out of my politics. Mm-hmm. Don't try to legislate your morality, essentially, because America is not a Christian nation. I know that's kind of two separate topics there, but America is a Christian nation. I'm sure you've heard it before, too.
Sure.
How do we go about answering this question? Is America a Christian nation?
So would we, are we going to talk about at its foundations or today?
Well, I guess that's what you're getting at, right? Is it depends.
But even that, yeah, I mean, that there's no, quick answer on the foundation part of it. But I mean, we can say with certainty that it's not a Christian nation today.
Yeah, just let's start there. I think that's a gimme. That's a more easier question.
Right.
So let's start with that one. Today,
Yeah.
Can we call America a Christian nation of any sorts?
If we're going to hold to a very technical idea of what Christianity is,
Yes.
then I don't think so. I wouldn't say that that it is, because.
So even in terms of, let's say, policies that are being promoted this day and age, what does the culture look like, or even the number of Christians that exist in America? I think on all those are 3 strikes, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I would guess so.
So in that sense, yeah, I would say, again, this all depends. Like if you're engaging in a conversation with somebody, and you have one idea of what you mean by a Christian nation, and the other person is thinking something different, you could be talking past each other. So that's why we're saying, usually you want to take a step back, define your terms.
What is it that we're saying here? Like, are we talking about today? Are we talking about the founding fathers? And then with the question about the founding fathers, could we say that? That most of our founding fathers were Bible-believing Christians. Mm-hmm. I think so. I think we could say that. I think that when we consider their affiliations, the churches that they attended, the theology that they embraced, there's some kookiness going on in there, and just like with the church today, but I think for the most part we could say that according to one researcher, of the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, nearly 24 held seminary or Bible school degrees. So just out of the group that signed the Declaration,
they thought it important enough to
almost half of them at least had a seminary or Bible school degree. Now that's a pretty strong showing of the men who actually went past just going to church on Sunday, but actually went and got a Christian seminary education or some sort of Bible school education, right? Yeah. And so beyond that, how many of them, didn't go for the full-blown Bible school education, but were, Bible-believing Christians who went to church every Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. And Wednesday, if you're super spiritual. But yeah. So, and then when you get into reading, their writings, when you read their biographies, autobiographies, when you read their their statements about what the foundations of America were, then you could probably come around to the idea that while America, I don't think, was intentionally founded to be a Christian nation, I believe that the underpinnings of our government system were based on biblical principles. I think that would be a fair statement. Yeah.
So they never intended to have like a state religion.
I don't think they were trying to form a Christian commune.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Right. And so, you even see this in Jefferson's, the separation of church and state declaration, right? Mm-hmm. The idea was that they're trying to get away from state-run religion, so that people can come to America and engage in their own expression of worship of God, and which allowed for not only Christians to come here, but other faiths as well. Yeah. So no, I don't think our founding fathers were attempting to establish a Christian communion with a state-run religion.
Right.
So therefore, I would be hesitant to say that America was intended to be a Christian nation, but I do believe that the government system, the form of government that was created, was created with an understanding of what the Bible says and leaning on the truth of God's word as the basis for the form of government that we ended up with.
Right. So the framework which they were working with was an explicit Christian framework, in such that the way they set up the government, right? the way they set up the balance of powers with the checks and balances, right? Knowing basically there's assumptions that could only be made from with Christian worldview lenses on.
Right.
That would be the only way it would make sense of the government that they founded. Now, there's good arguments to say that it looks drastically different today than what it was intended.
Yes.
But that's what we're trying to get at, is the founding of it could only make sense when you have a Christian worldview, a Christian framework.
Yeah, I mean, we see this in a quote from John Adams, who was not only a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but he was also the second president of the United States, as well as a signer of our Bill of Rights. And here's the way Adams put it: the general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. So he's basically saying here that, the founding fathers of America achieved our independence, by applying the general principles of Christianity to the decisions that they were making. Mm-hmm. So again, they weren't, I don't think, intending to create a Christian commune here.
Yeah.
Where only Christians can live and, that sort of thing.
But only Christians can hold office,
sure.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
But I do believe that, they were intentionally using the general principles of Christianity as a basis for establishing the form of government that they created.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any others to share? Because I know, you have many founding fathers, and that's the other kind of trope that I hear is that, well, you do know the majority of them were deists, or that the collective were deists, and that was heavily influential in the way they were building up. So it's not a Christian nation, and we'll get into whether or not, how important is this question even so, right?
Right.
But the point is that we're trying to say is that, no, we have good evidence that from the writings that they left us to show that, no, the underpinnings, the actual framework, the literal ground foundation, that view that they had was Christian principles founded within Scripture. So
here's how John Quincy Adams put it. This is our sixth president, and so here we are, the six presidents, after the founding here, and he's looking back at the information that he gathers from those founding fathers, and he says this: in the chain of human events, the birthday of the nation is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior. The Declaration of Independence laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity. So here's our sixth president saying that the Declaration of Independence, it laid the cornerstone of the human government that we have, and this was laid upon the first precepts of Christianity, meaning, that they're going into the New Testament and looking at what does the New Testament say about government, and they're basing, our government here in America upon those principles that they learned, from the New Testament.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just, they're speaking loudly and clearly here.
Here's what John Jay says. Now, John Jay, this is the first Chief Justice of the United States, and he once stated this: Providence has given to our people the choice of their rulers, and it is the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians for their rulers. So very interesting statement, that he saw at that point in time that we were a Christian nation, and even encouraged us to seek out and elect Christians to lead us, right? So that's another point of view, from one of our founding fathers. Now, it should be noted also that there were a few deists in the group, right? Most notably Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. These guys were deists. So, when you consider their deism, you certainly see it, like in Jefferson's, version of the Bible and whatnot.
By the way, can you define deism for our audience that might not know what deism is?
I think the simplest explanation is that they believe in God, they just don't believe that God is interacting in the world. So then it comes the question of miracles, and does God intervene in the world around us today? I think that'd probably be the best summation of it. But here's something that Thomas Jefferson said. Now he was a deist, but he believed himself to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And he said, I am a real Christian, that is to say, a disciple of the doctrines of Jesus Christ. And so while it is true that he was a deist and even engaged in a little Bible editing on his own, but in his mind, he's in line with what the Bible says, right? He really wasn't, but he wasn't coming along and saying, I'm a deist and all you guys are bozos and you don't know what you're talking about. And he's saying, I'm a Christian just like the rest of you guys are. That's what he thought, right? Benjamin Franklin, here's something he said. Here is my creed. I believe in one God, the creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped. Right. So while, he was of the opinion that, the miraculous was no longer for today, he certainly believed in a miraculous creator who created the universe and that this God ought to be worshipped. Right. So, you can call Benjamin Franklin a deist all day long, and he was. And yet it doesn't mean that he wasn't in his own way attempting to understand who Jesus was or follow him or apply, the principles of the scriptures as he understood them, to his work as a founding father, right? Mm-hmm. Now, again, the guy was a deist, right? Yeah. His theology, fell short of lining up with, all of the scriptures that I think clearly lay out a God who is still engaging in miraculous works even today. Yeah. But if the people who want to dismiss the founding fathers as being Christians because of the few deists in the group, well, go read what these guys said, because they're still pointing at Jesus Christ as being an important person and in our form of government.
Right. Yeah. No doubt the influence of Christianity is there.
Right.
Regardless if you have a handful of deists, but for the most part, you had Bible-believing Christians who got together and wanted to make a government that reflected the precepts of Christianity. So they went back to the scriptures and saw, what can we gather from here that will help us form a government that is going to provide a flourishing society.
That's right.
Not only just for Christians, but for the world at large. Regardless of your religion, regardless of your gender, your race, all of that, they wanted to provide a flourishing society because, as we see in the founding documents, right, the Declaration of Independence, we see that all men are created equal. And these certain inalienable rights were given to us by our Creator.
That's right.
It's right there. They were very explicit in what they believed.
Yep.
And they opened up with prayer in their congressional meetings. As governors went back to their states, they called for times of fasting. They called for times of prayer, times of repentance. No doubt that influence was there. That's the way they ran the country, and that's the way they ran their states. And so when we get back to this objection that, no, America's not a Christian nation. Okay, in one sense, obviously not.
Right.
Especially modern day era, we definitely are lacking an influence of Christianity in this society.
Most certainly.
But when we get back to the foundations, and this is where the most important part, I believe, is I'm appealing to the skeptic, really. The skeptic that doesn't believe in God or is kind of on the fence, but they want to say, basically, keep your religion out of politics. But I'm saying, what you're actually doing, what you're attempting to do, and you might not know this, but you're actually borrowing from our worldview. You're borrowing from Christianity in order to make those moral claims that the legislative body does. Whenever laws are passed, what do you think is being done? There is a moral component to many of the significant laws that we have in our society. And the bigger question to me is, how do you justify making those moral claims? And that's where it's important to me to show that the foundations, the underpinning of our American government is Christianity. The mere fact that we have freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the fact that we can call all of our neighbors equal human beings, we're on the same level, and we have inalienable rights, all these ideas come from Christianity. And so for the skeptic who comes along and says, don't bring your religion into my politics. Don't legislate your morality. And I'm saying, in reality, you're stealing from my worldview. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I saw a father pick up his son the other day, set him up on his shoulders, piggyback ride, or not piggyback, but set him on his shoulders, right? And the little boy sitting on the shoulders looked down on everybody else around and said, "I'm taller than all of you." And I just thought, that's what American politicians are like today. They're standing on the shoulders of our founding fathers, thinking that they've done something great, while dismissing, like the 1619 Project.
Sure.
Just trashes our founding fathers. Granted, our founding fathers weren't the best people in the world, and many Americans, throughout the ages have done horrific things. Thankfully, we do have a system of government that, to some degree, is self-correcting. Yeah. And we can talk more about that. But in reality, when you look at the Declaration of Independence, when you look at the Constitution, when you look at the Bill of Rights, when you look at all the hard work that went into defining the form of government that America is built upon, the politicians today are standing on the shoulders of giants, and they're saying, "Look how tall I am." It's like, you're not that tall.
All the while, rejecting that foundation.
That's right? That's my point. That's what that child was doing. He wasn't saying, look at how, high and lifted up I am because my dad put me on his shoulders, but look how tall I am. It's a rejection of where you even are right now.
Yeah.
You're rejecting, the Father who, number one, produced you and then put you up on his shoulders so that you could look down on people, right?
Yeah.
It is a complete many politicians today, not all of them, of course, there's some who recognize our founding fathers for, the hard work that they did. But, but to stand up, on the shoulders of giants and then just act like you're standing on your own 2 feet, it's like, no, you're not that tall.
Yeah.
You need to, give some respect to, those who came before you, the men that God used, to come and create a form of government that, not perfect, but really good.
Yeah, and that's a good point about basically having a healthy skepticism and understanding of, obviously, there were atrocities. The founding fathers that owned slaves, obviously, this is something that is a horrible injustice, right? And how do you balance that with the fact that they had these really, really wise thoughts about how government should be set up? Do you have to dismiss one because of the other?
Right.
And I think not. I don't think this is the way we live our life in general. But it's really when politics comes into play again, that's where we somehow get into this nasty circle, this evil circle of the cancel culture, basically. That's what's going on today. It's kind of this anachronism that looks back on history, and we see ourselves as moral progressives, that we have been enlightened. Our generation today is somehow the brightest and the most moral society because we just came later in time. We've learned from our past mistakes. And to that I say, are you sure? Have you looked around for the...
Did you see how many kids were aborted today?
I mean, talking in the lingo of today, right? Like you're speaking from a place of privilege at that point.
Yeah.
Go somewhere in some other country, or go into some inner city or some ghetto where, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of suffering around us, and there are politicians who are furthering that stuff. There are groups of individuals who get together and try to cancel other people, and this is happening on both sides. So let's just be realistic in our understanding of, people in their time and place in history. Obviously, they made bad choices. We make bad choices too. Some are worse than others, of course. I'm not trying to make light of the injustices that were done.
Right.
But let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's focus on how do we investigate the content of what they wrote. Does it make sense? Does it hold up? Is it coherent? Is it the best for our society today? Can we use that and reform it? Let's be mature about this and not try to cancel everybody out.
Yeah.
And especially for the Christian, we have a mandate to have a higher standard of morality on us in society.
Yeah, not to mention that, there are places in the world today where slavery is still practiced, right? So, which is not to say, well, they're doing it completely wrong, and so, let's just overlook anything wrong with our own society. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, if there's a real civil war or a civil, battle to fight, so to speak, why not go and try to convince those societies that still own slaves, still enslave people? Why not go try to, change those cultures and help them to get up to where we are today? Because, here in America, of course, slavery is clearly criminal. And sadly, that hasn't always been the case. But I praise the Lord that we have a form of government that it does have that self-correcting, feature, that we recognize that we have been created equally, by God, and that we do have this Bill of Rights. And I think that if there is a battle to fight here in America for the rights of people who are being trampled on, it's the unborn.
Yeah.
We have, a civil rights issue happening here in America every single day. When the government allows a mother to say, my child is not a human,
right,
but rather a parasite, a cancerous kind of growth that I can just evacuate if I so choose.
Or they are a human, I just don't want them.
That's the biggest civil rights issue happening in our country today, and so many people just dismiss it and even further the cause. And now, we're about to, find ourselves as a nation being forced to spend taxpayer money on abortions.
Yeah.
And that's not the will of the people. That is in opposition to the will of the people.
Yep.
The statistics, the polls show that the majority of Americans do not want taxpayer dollars being spent on abortion or the promotion of abortion. And yet, just by executive order.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And so, by the way, we did speak in depth about the abortion topic. This was a couple of episodes ago, so feel free to jump on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Calvary South Austin, and there's a playlist for Studio 118. You'll see the past episodes. There's one on abortion. But, in relation to our main point here about how, the skeptic is basically borrowing from the Christian worldview when we understand the true foundations of this nation. That's where I believe that's the real conversation I want to have. When people bring up, America's a Christian nation or it's not a Christian, it's like, I couldn't care less. I really want to focus in on how does your worldview make sense of the world. And then how does that lead you to then vote on certain policies, right? Like one is definitely abortion.
Right.
If your worldview is telling you that it is okay to view a segment of the population as non-human and therefore we can exterminate them, I don't care what your answer is to whether America is a Christian nation. We have a worldview problem. And so those are the conversations that are really more interesting to me because it starts with worldview. And again, obviously, I believe I'm a Christian. Christianity is the best of all worldviews. It makes sense of reality. It makes sense of our origins. It makes sense of our current situation, and it makes sense of where we're going. So when you have the Christian worldview, it is definitely going to inform us on a lot of these policy questions that have a moral component to them, right? So think about the issues such as war. When is it ever okay to go to war?
What is it good for?
I don't know.
Huh. You did it.
Come on.
You did it.
Absolutely nothing.
So yeah, is there ever a just war?
Right.
Some would say no.
Some would say yes.
I would certainly agree, especially when you look at, we certainly needed to go to war, to stop, the Nazis from exterminating every Jew on the planet. That was a just war.
Yeah.
Not to say that every war is just, but there certainly have been some just wars that were necessary.
Yeah.
And so how would you make those decisions? How would you determine what a just war even is unless you have an ultimate standard of what justice is?
Yep.
What is just? How do we decide that? How, where do we get that from? What is the basis for even understanding this concept of justice?
Yeah.
Just popular vote? Is it just conventional wisdom? If so, is it societal? Did we have the right to work together against Nazi Germany to stop, what was happening over there?
Or even in terms of if we bring in evolutionary theory, right? If that's the name of the game, if that's our origins, then obviously we're all just, globs of protoplasm just fizzing differently.
Just carrying forward the genetic programming that I had no say over, and my thoughts are forced upon me. My actions are inevitable.
And I just
am inevitable.
Yeah. Snap the finger. Snap it. And, basically, I'm doing what I got to do in order to propagate my DNA over to the next generation, right? There's no moral repercussion to that. So why was any war different than the other?
Sure.
It's just people colliding into each other. There's no moral component to
right.
that. If that's your worldview, again, we're talking about worldviews. Your worldview will determine what you're going to favor in certain policy actions. Yeah,
this brings us around to COVID, and not to be heartless, and my heart does break for those who have died of COVID-19. But at the same time, my heart breaks because I'm a Christian, and I recognize that this is a sign and evidence of a fallen world, which is filled now with disease and death, right? So my heart breaks because I look at this and recognize that this isn't the way that God wanted it, but this is the way it is because mankind sinned and brought death into the world, right? But if I'm an evolutionist and I believe that we're all a big cosmic accident and now we're just matter in motion and there is no rhyme or reason or there is no absolute truth beyond just societal
contrast.
Yep. Exactly. If that's the case, then I must also subscribe to the idea that the strong will survive, and that the weak have to be weeded out so that what's perpetuated by way of reproduction is what is strongest, right? So if people really believe that, then wouldn't they applaud something like COVID-19? Wouldn't they want to just look at this and say, oh, yeah, we need to get rid of a bunch of people here, and this has been a great way to do it?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have that point of view if you truly are an evolutionist? If you really believe the strong shall survive, then why wouldn't you applaud like a school shooting? Or why wouldn't you applaud something like, the mass extermination of an entire race of people because this guy says they're subhuman and therefore if they can't defend themselves, then there is no place for them on the planet, because that's what evolution says. When a pack of wolves go and kill their prey, they track down, an elk, and they pick off the weak one. The rest of the elks don't get together and say, this is an outrage, and how dare you wolves think that you can just, no, it's just the way nature works. And if evolution is true, that elk needed to die because it was the weak one of the group.
Yeah.
Or the herd. So when I look at, over the past year, how careful everybody has been to protect those who, are the most vulnerable in our society. I applaud that. I think that's a great thing. But at the same time, to me, that all that says to me is that you don't really believe in evolution. You don't really believe in the strong will survive. You're smuggling in Christian ethics by expecting everyone else to now mask up and take all these precautions so that we can protect those who are vulnerable. And I'm all for protecting those who are vulnerable, but because of my Christian worldview.
That says that even the most vulnerable among us are made in the image of God.
That's right.
Doesn't make them any less valuable.
And as much as I would support the protection of those who are vulnerable, from COVID-19, I would also seek to protect those who are most vulnerable and still in the womb. But now we have a society that can't make sense of this. They want to protect these vulnerable people, but not those vulnerable people. Why? Well, because someone came along and identified these vulnerable people as subhuman. They're not yet human yet. Why? Well, because mom said so.
Yep.
It's not a worldview that is consistent, and therefore it's not logical. It breaks down all over the place. It's self-defeating. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't flow from evolutionary thought process.
Yeah.
But we have a government which wasn't built upon an evolutionary thought process, but rather a biblical principle, right? Patrick Henry, now he was a ratifier of the U.S. Constitution. Patrick Henry said this: "It cannot be emphasized too strongly."
In the strongest
it's in the strongest of possible terms here, right? So it cannot be emphasized too strongly or too often that this great nation was founded not by religionists, but by Christians. Not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. For this very reason, peoples of other faiths have been afforded asylum, prosperity, and freedom of worship here. Incredible.
Yeah.
What an incredible worldview. To say that because we love Jesus, we're going to form this nation that affords other people asylum so that they can experience prosperity, so that they can pursue life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness.
Yep.
It's an incredible idea.
Yeah.
Not to say that, America has got it right all along the way. There's much wrong with American history. But the principles were were built upon Christian truth and have, become, an incredible place for people to come and experience freedom and have liberty and I'd hate to see it all just go up in smoke, with people who don't understand the form of government that was initially created, so that now we're starting to see that, the three branches of government aren't working the way that they should. The federal government is starting to kind of, and even state level governments are starting to realize that they can just push stuff through, through executive order. And, we no longer have to respect the three branches of government and the separate powers. And, so now, no longer is Congress the one making the laws, and no longer is the executive branch, either vetoing or passing through from bill to law. And no longer are we looking to the Supreme Court, to determine, which of these laws are unconstitutional and should be done away with, or revisited and reimagined. Or we no longer have this same form of government because we have people in the government who don't understand the principles upon which our government was founded. I think John Adams addresses this pretty well. This is the second U.S. president. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He once insisted this. He says, "The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the only principles in which that beautiful assembly of young gentlemen could unite, and these principles only could be intended by them in their address, or by me in my answer. And what were these general principles? I answer, the general principles of Christianity, in which all these sects were united, and the general principles of English and American liberty." He's saying that all the different religious sects came together there at the beginning and, set aside what they disagreed about in an attempt to just look at what are the basic principles of Christianity, and let's build from there a form of government that lines up with New Testament theology.
Yeah.
That's what our, initial government is built upon. And when people come and attempt to lead on the shoulders of that giant, and then pretend like they're the ones who are tall, they're going to be looking down on people. But that's not the style of government that we're supposed to have. These are elected officials that are there to represent the people, not to rule over us, not to look down on us. And yet, we have so many politicians that don't get that. Why? Because they're not Christian, and because they don't understand the Christian principles upon which this government was created.
Yeah, what's that old saying? Here's another. Second old saying of the night. You don't know where you're going until you know where you've been, right? So what I see a lot is people who have just kind of come to submit themselves to the idea that this is the way of life now. This is the new normal, so to speak.
New normal.
Or this is the status quo, We can't go back to those.
The status
principles.
quid pro quo.
Yeah, quid pro quo. Vis-a-vis, ergo. So, there is this kind of throw your hands up in defeat and say, well, executive orders and, state government taking over, powers just kind of being usurped by one branch, this kind of stuff. And that's just the way it is. Or people who have kind of secretly been looking for that to happen. Like, yes, this candidate who won is now on my side of things. And I don't care, they're usurping power. They can, as long as they're passing stuff that I'm in agreement with, it's okay, And so it's just basically we need to go back to the beginning. And that's what I'm saying. It all starts with worldview. When you understand the principles of Christianity, it is going to enlighten you on these topics. Like what we mentioned, we've been talking about war, we've been talking about abortion. And so for the audience out there, I hope you understand that Christianity definitely speaks to a whole host of topics that are relevant for today. So we talked about war, talked about abortion. There's the issues of same-sex marriage that it has been raging for the last decade or two. The transsexual movement, which is definitely coming back in fashion these last few years. The topic of pornography in the public sphere, and how should we view that? We see that in media. We definitely see that in media and in literature. What about the topic of education? Who should be the primary caretaker for our children? Who should take that role? And what comes along? What are the implications of that, right? Like here in Texas, definitely, and even around, there's been experiments basically being done of starting sex education at a kindergarten level. Well, who's making this curriculum? Who has power over what our kids are being fed? There's stories of, even here in Texas and Houston, there was libraries were starting to experiment with this drag queen story time, basically. And so is this appropriate for that age group? These are valid questions to have, but it all starts with worldview. What is your worldview informing you of? And so how should you look at these policies that are being passed? What about poverty? There's poor people among us. Christianity definitely has something to say about how we should treat the most vulnerable and the most poor among us. Capital punishment. Is it ever okay to, as a form of retribution, as a form of justice, to take the life of an individual who has taken the life of others? Or should we just lock them up in jail for the rest of life? Those are valid conversations to have, but what is your worldview informing you of?
I just wonder, what does Q Shaman say about all of this?
I have no idea what that is. Too obscure. But I think one or two people out there will get it.
Yes.
It's going to make its way around.
That's who it's for.
You're going to get an email in your inbox. So yeah, Christianity, believe me, it talks about these issues, not explicitly, but there are biblical principles, these general principles that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes now, that are going to lead us in the direction of how to view these topics correctly. But if you're the skeptic out there, if you're the atheist or agnostic, and you're trying to say, hey, keep your religion out of the political sphere, I'm sorry, you must be confused. You are borrowing, you are stealing from our worldview, and everybody's making a moral claim. Everybody's making a moral claim. The atheist and the agnostic, the skeptic, whoever you are not free from this vulnerability here. You are making a moral claim as well. The whole topic is, it's begging the question. The question is, whose worldview makes sense of this? Right. Okay?
Yeah, and pretty much all laws deal with morality in some way, shape, or form. Any legislation that's being passed has some level of morality connected to it. So those who insist, well, you shouldn't be legislating morality, well, at what point in time did that kick in? Because as far as I've ever known, that's what is being legislated, is what is the moral high road or the moral solution to this issue? Boom, law, right? Yep. You get someone who suggests this is the right way to do it, or this is what's moral, or this is what's right. let's pass it up and see if this bill doesn't become a law, right? So, those who would say you shouldn't legislate, morality, what they're really wanting to say is, I don't agree with your morality, and therefore it shouldn't be forced upon me. That's what they really mean. Mm-hmm. But then they'll be the first one to turn around and attempt to legislate their own morality. Yeah. Well, you can't say this, or if you say that, you'll have to be pulled off of this platform. And, it's like they want to legislate morality. They just want it to be their version of morality. But the problem with that is that, if you aren't looking to an objective standard of morality, then what you're really leaning on is just public opinion or personal opinion or conventional wisdom. Yeah. And of course we know how that's not a good standard for determining morality, right? We need an objective, universal standard of morality, which is beyond the mind of man, and it's got to come from our Creator. So that is the form of government that we have, a government that recognizes that we have been created, and therefore we need to look to our Creator to understand what is moral, what is correct, what is just, and then how should we proceed to legislate morality, so that we can create a society that is operating in a way that is most Christ-like. And if we don't do that, well, we're going to end up with a society that has another form of morality, which is probably immoral and not moral at all.
Yeah. Yep. Very well put. And so, just to kind of close out this discussion before we get into our Q&A time, we just want to kind of give a summary of what we've gone over, right? Just to give the audience a TLDR version. So we started out with the idea that there are two extremes that basically people have kind of backed themselves into a corner here. Number one, especially as Christians, how do we view politics? Can politics and Christianity ever mix? Can they coexist, so to speak? So we have the two extremes, the people who will elevate their political opinions over and above or over and against their theology. And for those, we call them to reprioritize and kind of come back and get to know the main thing, make the main thing, which is living your life through the mandates of Scripture. And part of that is focusing in on the Great Commission that has been given to every Christian. And for the people on the other extreme who are just completely opposed to doing anything with politics, number one, we hope to encourage you and say that this is the time and place that God has placed you in. And politics and living in a governed society is part of that culture. And so it is definitely beneficial for us, for Christians to be in the know, to be critical thinkers, and to be understanding of what is going on in culture, because as we said before, politics is downstream from culture. Whatever culture is going through right now is probably going to make its way through legislation in 5 to 10 years. So be aware of that. But then don't be so standoffish such that you won't have conversations. Have those conversations, because as we read in 1 Peter chapter 2 and Romans 13, God has placed us in these times, and he's telling us to submit to our government willingly, but not out of just being cowering, but for the purpose of being seen as blameless by the non-believers. And so that when they see us living out our faith and having those conversations, they will then glorify God. And that's the way we can change culture. So hopefully we can meet in the middle there. Hopefully we encourage our audience with that. And then we ended off on a really good discussion on the foundations of our nation and the biblical principles which they were founded upon, and the idea that these should be our guiding principles even today. And so the Christian should not fear, when there is pressure to stay out of political conversations or stay out of, voting your conscience, voting your biblical opinion. Be free to do that. But also understand that the skeptic who is trying to cancel you is also making a moral claim, right, and they need to be challenged on that.
So on the one extreme, those who would say Christians should never talk about politics need to realize that some of those political conversations that you ought to be having might be the inroad to taking someone deeper into a discussion about who Jesus is and why he needs to be the basis for American politics. And so if you're opposed to talking about politics, I encourage you to be open to it, and not so that you can go win political debates, but so that you can use discussions about politics for the sake of leading people to a greater understanding of who Jesus is and what he's done. And those who are so invested in politics that that's all they ever talk about, I'd encourage you to realize that it's the gospel that saves people, and it's the gospel message of Jesus Christ that is going to help people to give up some of those political leanings that we wish people didn't have, So in order to change someone's politic, arguing politics with that person is probably not going to be the solution, but leading them to Jesus will be. So have the political conversation with the goal of leading them to Jesus, because Jesus is the one that can change our lives.
Yeah, very good. All right, so that will officially close out our discussion portion. And right now we're going to head into our Q&A portion. Again, I encourage you, if you're on YouTube, we have a live chat going. We'd love to hear your questions. I see we have a couple here. We'll get into them. Also, if you're on Cable Access Channel 11, thank you for sticking with us. And I'm sure there's got to be other channels, but you chose to stay with us. Thank you. You can call in your question at 512-576-5433. Again, it's 512-576-5433. But let's get into our Q&As. Just try to get as many as we can. We got some really good ones. The first one I think I'll start off with is really, I'll point to you, Bunjee. You're pastor of this church. And, there's also some concerns or some objections about pastors sharing their political opinion. Is there room for that? How should pastors approach political topics? Is it okay to work that into sermons? And how do you kind of manage understanding that there's different, I'm sure there's different viewpoints within your congregation? How do you do that?
Well, so coming back to making sure that we have a biblical worldview first. To answer that question, I would just point to the scriptures. As we looked at earlier on in this time, we looked at a text from Paul, who talked about politics. We looked at a text from Peter, who talked about politics. We also considered some examples of times when the Lord raised up leaders to oppose the political leaders of the time period, right? So we see all throughout the scriptures times, when the Lord raised up his leaders to speak about politics or oppose, leaders who were in place at that point in time. And so just biblically speaking, we see that there is a good reason to think that pastors will at times be called upon to address political issues. So it shouldn't be difficult to imagine that the Lord would lead, pastors in the 21st century church to talk about politics and address the political issues that are before us. The person who would take issue with that, I would just encourage to just consider the scriptures that we brought up today. Romans 13, of course, is a big one where we find, again, Paul addressing the politics of his day. So just based on his example alone, I think that we have biblical precedent for thinking that that pastors ought to be talking about politics. And then Peter in 1 Peter chapter 2 also addresses politics and presents an example of Christians engaging in political conversations and attempting to understand a biblical point of view on how we are to engage in the political system that we're living under, right? Yeah. So then I would even point you to the pastors that were involved in politics, back in the foundations of our country. As I pointed out, there were 24 of the 56 founding fathers who had biblical degrees, biblical Bible school degrees or seminary degrees, and you go back and look at some of their writings and some of the pastors that were helping to undergird the founding fathers of our nation, and how they were preaching messages that had everything to do with politics and Christianity. And then also, we've seen throughout the ages where God has raised up pastors in modern history to take opposing positions to atrocities that were happening in various areas of the world. So yeah, I do believe that there are times when the Lord will lead pastors to engage the politics of the day and age.
Good. So taking it a step further, right? So in your congregation, there must be people with differing political viewpoints, right?
Sure.
On both sides of the aisle. And this is something that probably needs to be addressed, right? It's usually assumed that Christianity is conservatism, or Christianity, you got to be a Republican or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, I've definitely heard objections there where people are concerned, where they are afraid to speak out because they know they have a differing political opinion, and they hear conversations that they have their political affiliation or whatever being mocked and whatnot from fellow Christians, So
right.
How do you, in your estimation, how would you encourage the church at large to handle these types of differing political viewpoints, and then how does that flow into the everyday discussion, in the hallways and whatnot?
Yeah, so I did recently do a message called the unity of our community, and it had everything to do with helping our church to recognize that we're Christians first. So while I love political conversations and I love engaging in debates and discussions about American politics and policies and my stance on those things, it's so crucial for every Christian to remember that regardless of what side of the aisle we find ourselves on, Christians are Christians first, and our community needs to find unity in Jesus first, and the charity and the love that he wants to not only fill us with, but then calls us to extend to others, right? So we are to love one another. And when we come to church and worship side by side with somebody who is actually dead set on the other side of the political aisle, that we need to love that person and honor that person and respect that person, though we would disagree on the people that they might be voting for, right? So our unity is based in our faith in Jesus Christ first. And from that, I think that we ought to be able to engage in political conversation in a charitable, loving way. I've heard conservatives, use all kinds of derogatory terms, about those who are progressive. And I've heard progressives using derogatory comments about those who are conservative. And that shouldn't be happening in the church.
Right.
Christians shouldn't be engaging in these sorts of ad hominem attacks, right? If your ideas are good and your arguments are solid, then you shouldn't have to use verbal derogatory comments about the person that you're debating. Right. Just let your arguments stand as they are and be gracious and kind as you present them. Giving that defense for why you believe with gentleness and respect. A lot of times we want to give the defense without gentleness and respect, right? Yeah. So the Bible is very clear that we are to be gentle and respectful as we give our defense for why we believe what we believe. So with that, I would just encourage Christians on both sides of the aisle to be charitable and gracious, and recognizing that we've all arrived at where we've arrived at because we think that we're holding on to a position that is, in line with the scriptures, and I can see biblical arguments for certain aspects of the parties on both sides of the aisle. I would just point out that Jesus doesn't ride an elephant, nor is he still riding a donkey.
Yeah.
When he comes back, he'll be on a horse. So, but with that, I would just say that I've been on both sides of the aisle myself, right? So, I grew up, as a Democrat. After becoming a Christian, I ran to the Republican side, and after a little bit of time there, realized that this doesn't really line up with the scriptures completely either, and so I kind of became this independent, and since W's first term, I just kind of started voting for policies, not parties or persons.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really where I stand is as an independent voter, I'm not just tied to a party. And that would be my encouragement for every Christian is why would you tie yourself to a party knowing that there's going to be policies in that party that you disagree with, yep. Right? But, people get so tied to a party or to a person that I think they forget that, what we really need to vote for are biblical policies. And if somebody is promoting a policy that is going to do damage, it's going to hurt people and these sorts of things, we ought to pull back from voting for those individuals, right? So, I could vote for someone on either side of the aisle or someone that's right in the middle, some the third party. I have voted for a lot of third party people, and people will say, "Well, you're just throwing away your vote," but I'm not. It's my vote. And I'm going to stand before God one day and give an account for my life. And if I voted for the person that I thought he would vote for, then I can stand with great confidence before my Savior and say, I voted for a third-party individual. It's your job to put him in office. Yeah. I'm just going to vote for the one that I think best represents the policies that I agree with, regardless of where they find themselves in the political spectrum. So that's what I encourage Christians, here to do is vote for policies, not parties, and not persons,
and refrain from the derogatory talk. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm reminded. I think there's what's the verse? Let your speech be seasoned with grace, and that's towards the unbeliever.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So let's be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Here's a really good question about how do we handle conversations like this in our professional setting, in jobs.
Sure.
That's very interesting.
Well, I think Christians should work when they go to work. Mm-hmm. Right, if you go to work and you spend your whole day rather than working on what you're working on, and you're just
going around,
you're just on Facebook arguing with people. It's, that's not.
How do they do it?
Yeah, exactly like that.
Okay.
You know how I do it. Reuben shushed me one time because these sausage fingers.
Oh, yes. Even on a non-mechanical keyboard, still makes so much noise.
So, I would just I would encourage Christians to work while they're at work, right? But if we're talking about on break,
sure.
and you've got a little time, then by all means, if somebody's willing to have a political conversation, then I go back to be gracious, be generous, be compassionate, be understanding that, wherever that person is on their journey, the best thing that you can do to help them to, maybe line more up, with a Bible-centered politic, is to bring the conversation around to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right, and look for those opportunities. So I'll engage in a conversation about anything, and the whole time I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, where do I lead this person around to helping them see their need for Jesus? Right?
Who would win, a scorpion or a rat?
Well,
how do you bring that around to Jesus?
When you really look at the design of the scorpion and the rat, clearly there's a creator God who. So
round one,
fight. So I would encourage Christians to work while they're at work and not get all caught up in in these things, but during breaks and during times that make sense, engage people who are in. I would bring it back to a conversation that I had when I was working at Tower Records. I'd been a Christian just for a short amount of time, and there was one guy who always wanted to stop off, in my office and have these arguments about, evolution and Jesus and Christianity is just a crush and all these, every time it was like some jab, some argument. And so, I would engage them. And finally my boss came to me one day and just said, look, I've gotten a complaint about you, preaching Jesus everywhere, and I was able to tell my boss, well, listen, that person started the conversation. They came into my office, they engaged me, and here's what I told them. And then I began to preach the gospel to him. Yeah. So I'm preaching the gospel to my boss, who's there to reprimand me for preaching the gospel. But in my defense, I engaged in the conversation because they started it. They threw the jab out and presented the question that was the unanswerable question, and I answered it. Very good. And so they went and told on me. They tried to get me canceled and fired, and it gave me the opportunity to just evangelize my boss. Nice. And he said, thanks for that, and walked out. So, just, pray for wisdom. When you're at work, you have a boss that is expecting you to work, and you want to be a good testimony in the way that you accomplish your job. Oh, yeah. But then be prayerful that, God, as God opens doors, and that's one of my prayers every day is, God, just show me the open doors, show me the opportunities that are before me, because I'll miss them if I'm not just mindful of it. So go to work, be prayerful, be a good employee, work hard, and then ask God to help you to see those opportunities that are there.
Yeah, and definitely, I would definitely encourage, if this is something that you want to participate in, when you, on your free time, whenever you have some time, be learning more about these topics, so that when that opportunity arises, then you can confidently speak about differing viewpoints, and then you can counter, navigate this conversation and issue counterpoints and whatnot, and you can do it in a winsome way, and just look for those opportunities, but be ready for those opportunities. All right, so we got about a little over 5 minutes left, Bunjee. We have a few questions left, so maybe we can rapid fire some of these.
Here we go.
But another popular one that is definitely gaining ground, I see, especially among millennials, Gen Z, is this issue of like democratic socialism. Mm-hmm. And even within the Christian circles, social justice is a big phrase. And so there's a passage that people will point to in the Bible that says, well, they did socialism in the Bible, why can't we do it now? So Acts chapter 2, where they shared everything, all their possessions and goods and whatnot. Is this socialism?
No.
Can you do it?
No, it's communal. It's certainly communal. You could say that, every family is socialistic. Those who earn a wage, come and put all their money into the same bank account, and then that money is equally distributed amongst the needs of the family, right? So in some sense, every family is socialistic. If you want to use a very loose definition of socialism in that way. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about socialism, we're talking about the government means of production, and basically
the removal of private property is centralized.
Removal of private property, where in Acts, we don't see the removal of private property. We don't see a forced labor, or
because they sold their possessions.
And the idea is that they sold the excessive or the extra possessions that they had acquired, the possessions that they didn't need, they sold, and then gave that money to the leaders of the church. They gave that money to the apostles and allowed the apostles to just distribute that money as they saw fit, right? Socialism is the government forcing that. This is something that they chose to do, right? So that's one big factor that helps us to see that this is not socialism in Acts chapter 2. And we even find Jesus promoting capitalism in the Gospels. Jesus, is approached by a guy who comes along and says, hey, tell my brother to split the inheritance with me. And Jesus says, what business of that is mine, or Jesus tells the parable about, the landowner who hires, laborers in the morning and then at lunch and then towards the end of the day, and then pays them all the same wage. And then this guy comes along and complains, hey, wait a minute, we worked all day and you gave us the same amount of money as the guy that just worked a few hours. And Jesus turns around and puts words into the mouth of the landowner and just says, it's my money.
And you agree?
It's my land, it's my money. I can pay anybody whatever wage I want to pay them, right? This is clear capitalism that Jesus is promoting in this parable, right? So nowhere do we see Jesus or any other New Testament writer encouraging socialism, and to the contrary, we actually see Jesus encouraging capitalism.
Very good.
Yeah.
So I would just push back a little bit, but I would say elements of capitalism, because there are elements of capitalism that do encourage greed, obviously, that
sure.
It's just kind of ends justify the
You're
means,
right.
but it does benefit the public.
Right.
But private property is definitely one of them, and essentially voluntary transactions and that kind of stuff, but not socialism for sure.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you own Robin Hood and oh, okay.
Game stunk. Okay, a couple more minutes here. Actually, one more minute.
One more.
Maybe we can get one here. Is it, I don't know if we can get this in a minute. I think what we'll do is when it comes time to get off Cable Access Channel 11, we'll just go for a little bit longer and answer the rest of the questions, because we got some really good questions that I really want to get into. And but let's, I got 30 seconds here. Let's see if we can answer this one in 30 seconds before we go offline with the...
We'll see.
with Cable Access Channel 11. Is it ever okay to disobey government?
If you're a Q shaman, so...
Go for it.
Oh, wow. That's a tough... We can't do that in 30 seconds.
Let's answer this on the back end. We're going to roll some credits for Cable Access Channel 11. Thank you for joining us. Go to youtube.com/Calvary South Austin. We will see you there. We got a handful of really good questions. We want to make sure we devote a good amount of time and get those questions answered. So we're going to continue with our Q&A portion. Thank you for submitting these questions, really good ones. Again, if you want to submit some more, stay on that YouTube live chat, engage there, and they'll queue up the questions for you. But before that break, I just asked Bunjee, is it ever okay to disobey the government? Tread lightly.
Yes. So...
Yes, what?
I struggle with this every day when I get in my truck.
Yes. I have personally experienced this.
And so is it okay for me that I can't drive 55? You know, I want to be careful here, you know, because, you know, we did just see a group made up of different groups. I think that, you know, when we look at the event that happened there at the Capitol, you know, we certainly see, you know, there were apparently Antifa people, BLM people, Proud Boys, you know, we saw Q people, you know, basic Trump supporters, you know, so there's a mixture of people that got caught up in, you know, what's being labeled an insurrection. You know, I would be hard-pressed to say that, let's just put it that way, I didn't go. I didn't necessarily agree with all of that. But, you know, the foundations of our nation, you know, were for a large part, you know, based on a revolution, a rebellion, you know, against a monarchy, you know. So
they essentially rejected the representation that they felt was doing them wrong.
Yeah,
and they felt the need that, hey, if it comes to blows, then so be it. If in order to,
and now we drink coffee. So it's a win-win. Yeah. It's a win-win. But so, you know, is revolution, you know, always wrong, biblically speaking? And so I would go back to just pointing out the characters that we see through the scriptures that God specially raises up for those specific times when that is the right time for this, right?
Keyword, yeah.
And so that's where I would just say, you know, be careful if you think that God's using you to start a revolution. You know, make sure that, you know, you're actually hearing from the Lord, you know, because there's going to possibly be, you know, some huge consequences, right? I can't say that, you know, God's leading me to engage in any kind of political revolution, right? Mm-hmm. And I would just have to assume that, much like Moses, who was at the beginning making excuses for why he can't go talk to Pharaoh, I would assume that those who, feel like the Lord is leading them to, to engage in some sort of, political revolution, would probably want to, just be humble about it at the beginning and just recognize that, you need that confirmation before you do something to that degree, because the baseline of what the Bible says, is that, you are to be a good citizen, abide by human government, submit to those in authority, pay your taxes, and these sorts of things, right? That is the baseline for the Christian life. Is it possible that God could spark a revolution, through Christians, so that there is some sort of disobedience of the current political system? Well, we see it happen often in the Scriptures. So clearly, biblically speaking, the answer is yes. Of course, that can happen. But again, I would just say that we don't. This isn't a normative thing. This is something that really needs to come with a great deal of humility and caution that you are actually hearing from the Lord. Otherwise, you might find yourself under investigation as the FBI comes knocking on your door and asks you what you were doing in Washington, D.C. on January the 6th,
Yeah. Yeah, and I consider, the early church when they were under all that immense persecution, right? And for anybody to start a revolution, obviously they were probably outmanned and outgunned, but what was their mindset at the time? What was their attitude? And their attitude was really kind of looking to their Savior Jesus and really, how do I say it, relating with him in his sufferings, right? In those examples that we do see, and one of the questions here was about how Paul, how he basically met his death.
Right.
But he is over here saying, submit to government. Is there a contradiction there? I would say no. Really, he spoke a lot about how we relate to Christ a lot when we suffer for his name's sake, for his righteousness' sake.
That's right.
And so again, like you're right. These examples about people being specially raised up, and that's the key word. You really need to consider that this is not a normative thing.
Right.
That shouldn't be your first go-to action. And I think a big force behind this question is, what if, I'm sure there's a lot of conservatives out there who are afraid that what if there's a law that somehow, makes Christianity illegal, or some form, some element of Christianity illegal? What should we do then?
Right. And so this brings us to the next part of this conversation, which is, should we be forced to disobey? Should we obey the government when the government attempts to force us to disobey God? And I've talked about this fairly extensively, and typically I bring this up when I do teach through something like a Romans 13, which is at the baseline we are called to submit to human government, but when human government is no longer doing what God would have them to do, when human government begins to disobey God and attempts to then force the people of God to disobey God, that's when it's clear that we obey God and not man. That's what Peter said, when the authorities there in Israel tried to silence them from preaching the gospel. Peter first posed the question, should we obey you or God, right? And then they arrested him again, and Peter then brought the answer. And just in case you missed it, we're supposed to be obeying God, not men, right? So at the end of the day, when there is the rub between should I obey man or should I obey God? And if I obey man, then I'll be disobeying God. And if I obey God, then I'll be disobeying human government. What should I do? Biblically speaking, you obey God. We always appeal to the highest authority, and the highest authority ultimately is God. Then there are things like abortion, right? So abortion is legal, so a Christian could go get an abortion, right, legally speaking. But then that would be an act of disobedience because God hates the hands that shed innocent blood, right? So even in that sense, like there is something that you could do legally here in America, but that God would be opposed to, right? So will you disobey God even though the government is giving you the right to do this? And again, the answer would be no. You should obey God even though this government has given you the right to take the life of your child.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's obviously there's kind of no real clear-cut way to answer this, but in general, I think we need to be very, very careful when we're talking about, because I'm sure there's people out there that have in mind, like, there's a revolution coming, and they got to get ready for it, and they're just kind of like, they're already up here.
Trust the plan.
When they, yeah. Nice. When they need to be down here looking at Scripture and basically trusting in the Lord.
Right.
Really.
Trust the
What
Lord.
does that look like?
Yeah.
And you look back at the early followers. What was their mindset at the time? Different examples.
Jesus submit to human government.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, going back to this question that you just referenced, you want to read that question about Paul?
About Paul, yeah. So in Romans 13, Paul writes about how Christians are to follow governmental authorities, yet his life ended with his decapitation by these authorities. How should we view this apparent contradiction? Yeah,
and I appreciate the word apparent there, because there is an apparent contradiction, but it's not a contradiction at all. It's more of a paradox, I would say, that, here's Paul encouraging submission to human government and ends up dying at the hands of human government, right? We see the same thing happening in the life of Jesus. As a matter of fact, it was necessary for Jesus to be prosecuted by human government and crucified so that we could be saved. Mm-hmm. So the idea that, submission to human government might result in your persecution, prosecution, and punishment, even maybe capital punishment, and why would God want that? Well, maybe that's exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's been said that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, right? So in other words, the church has been seeded by the blood of the martyrs, many times throughout the world. Yeah. So it might just be that the Lord wants a government to persecute the church so that the church wakes up and realizes that, NFL is not why we're here, right? And, following our favorite band is not why we're here. We're here to accomplish the Great Commission, which begins with the preaching of the gospel and the discipleship of those who come to faith in Christ. So there's no contradiction in Paul dying at the hands of human government after encouraging Christians to submit to human government, because this was God's plan for his life. Yeah. It was fulfilled to the T, and as a result, Paul is one of the greatest evangelists, ever.
Yeah, and that's true. I think that tends to ring true. So if you look around the world where Christianity seems to be growing in numbers, right? It's in areas where there's a lot of persecution.
Typically.
People like the underground church in China, even in North Korea,
yep.
and all around the world where there's persecution, and you see how genuine and simple their faith is.
Yeah.
And they just want to get back to living a basic Christian understanding of life. And we're here in America where we're blessed with abundance, and what we were talking about earlier, how the church is failing in so many areas.
Right.
And just thinking wrong-headedly, right?
There are Christians who are very concerned about politics that might lead to a banned Bible here in America, and yet didn't read the Bible today. Mm-hmm. That's wait. So you're worried that political leaders are going to end up banning the Bible, and you didn't take the time to read the Bible today? I mean, you banned it yourself in your own home, yeah. Right? So rather than worrying about, what's going to happen politically here in America, read your Bible, serve the Lord, worship him, preach the gospel, do all the things that the Lord is calling you to do today, and let him worry about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Very cool. Just a couple more then. Here's a good question. So this is actually very clever here. Should Christians utilize shame as a tactic for righteous political outcomes?
Shame on that person for asking that question.
If so, how? For righteous political outcomes.
It reminds me of that SNL skit, Dissing Your Dog.
Never saw it.
Anyway, so run that clip. No. So should we shame people into receiving Jesus Christ?
No, it says for righteous political outcomes. Should we use shame as a tactic? Is that okay? I
guess I would need more of a illustrative idea here. Are we talking about like going out on the streets with huge signs of abortions or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I guess I don't really. I mean, I don't think we should try to shame anybody intentionally, though I think, preaching against sin is going to bring shame.
Yeah, shame in and of itself is
so
depending on the context, right?
So, like, I think if my heart were, I'm going to try to shame people today so that they might, change their political point of view, I think my heart's wrong in all of that, right? Whereas if I say things that are true with a heart filled with love, and the person is shamed by that, and as a result they change their political point of view, then I think that was a good thing, right? So godly, sorrow leads to repentance, right? Yep. So if because I love this person, I lead them to a place of godly sorrow, and they feel shame in that, and as a result repent and get on board with the Lord Jesus Christ, I think that was a good thing that happened. But I don't think we should ever, have the intention of trying to go and shame people into changing their politics.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of I think it's Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians, right, where he's calling out the guy who essentially having relations with his stepmom.
Yeah.
And he said, call this dude out and basically take him out of the community.
Yes.
For the purpose, and that was a form of shame, so that he could see his own shame,
right,
and then return back to the flock, right?
And the heart behind that, though, was because a little leaven leavens the whole lump, right? So this person's sin was being celebrated, and as a result, it was infecting the whole Christian community, right? And so because this person wouldn't repent of their sexual sin, Paul said, you need to send him packing so that he stops infecting the church. So it wasn't, to some degree, Paul knew that it would bring shame upon this individual, but it was really for the protection of the fellowship, more so than the shaming of the person that wouldn't repent. But then Paul also recognized that as this person is forced back out into the world, that there would be an experience of being attacked by the enemy in a different sort of way that would hopefully turn him around. And that's what happened. He repented. He broke off that sexual relationship that was sinful, and repent.
He even warned them that you guys are going a little too far with this.
They didn't let him come back in. Right. When he repented, they kept him out. And Paul's like, hold on a second, guys. The guy repented, It's time to let him come back, right? So Paul had to correct them both ways. Yeah. But it's all been for our benefit as well, so that we can recognize that we do need to engage in church discipline in order to protect the sanctity of the fellowship. But then we also need to be, gracious and forgiving of those who do repent and want to come back.
Yep. Well put. Let's see, what else we got here? I guess last one that we'll end on is just to let everybody know we're not looking to install a theocracy here, but would a theocracy work?
So we're not trying to start a theocracy, but would it work? If we were. No, but, ultimately when Jesus returns and sets up his millennial kingdom, it will be a theocratic government, and it's going to work. So a theocracy works so long as you have the theos part of it.
So you had essentially a theocracy in the Old Testament, right?
Yes.
And obviously,
yes.
And so, but you had in this imperfect world with imperfect people, and so obviously there was cause for justice, basically laws to be in place. But in this new theocracy that you're talking about, in the new heavens and the new earth, we will have a transformation, a spiritual transformation, so that there's no longer a need for those laws.
I'm taking issue with some of what you're saying, just to the degree that I don't know that a theocracy has ever really worked on the planet, because even beginning with the Age of Innocence, you have two humans and one God overseeing them, and it didn't work. It didn't work. It fell apart. And then so they're cast out of the garden, and now you've got God overseeing a couple and their kids, and one of the boys kills the other. So again, it doesn't work. But then you carry that forward, and you get to the age of human government, and you see the people rejecting Abraham, rejecting Moses. You know, you see David's failures, you see Saul's failures, Solomon's failures. You know, going to the age of Judges. You know, when you had God overseeing the judges and there was no king, right? Well, what did the people do? They threw off constraint and did whatever they want. You know, you got the days of Noah. You know, when the people of the world, right before Noah tried to invade heaven. Mm-hmm. So it's just like it's not going to work until Jesus establishes the millennial kingdom here on earth.
The reason I bring that up, right, there are these, and it's usually the opposition in the political realm where they're afraid that there's, this secret group of Christians known as dominionists.
Yeah, the dominionists,
right? That they want to set
Not to be confused with the machine.
Neither work.
Neither the dominion machines or the theology works well.
Oh, we had to work that in somehow. But yeah, there's definitely no standing for that, no biblical precedent for that.
Right, yeah. So there's these seven theological hills that they're trying to conquer, so that they can usher in the millennial kingdom. Like it's our responsibility, to take control of the government, and to forced legislative morality, Christian morality on society, which will then turn everything around and basically make the path straight for Jesus to come and establish his millennial reign. And none of this is biblical. Yeah. not one. I mean, Jesus is going to come back. He's going to establish his so the end, of the second coming of Christ and, the millennial kingdom and the New Jerusalem, all that's going to happen, but it's not going to be because, Christians really finally got on board with the Great Commission and made it happen. Right. It's just going to be because, Jesus, sees that it's time to come back and destroy the enemies of Israel and establish his kingdom. So that's all in God's timing according to his timetable. And so when I see, our government continuing to manifest the lawlessness, that we've been seeing, as we see this just continuing to ramp up and the mystery of lawlessness growing worse and worse and worse, and the rot of sinful decay just continuing to eat away at the flesh of our nation, the more I just recognize that time to look up. Yeah, our redemption's drawing near. So. Yep.
And on that note, guys, that'll end our discussion today on politics and religion. And guess what? We didn't fight, which is great. And hopefully you won't either in your next political or religious conversation. So hopefully this was an encouragement to you. Go out there and think critically. Go read scriptures and understand the general principles that founded this nation. And be winsome in your conversations and go have some awesome conversations with your family, friends, and neighbors. And on that note, I'm Reuben. This is Bunjee, and we will see you next time.